Oh, is this for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cause hooked us up. Yeah. And it was in the refrigerated room.
I just flew in from the West End. My legs are tired.
Dude, don't even come at me about trouble between here and the West End.
Zakat. Yeah. I've heard it said a few times now.
Chug, chug, chug.
Get your own handle. Oh, yeah, it is 2 piece.
I have got to learn how to promote myself. It's not no idea how to do it. Ever since I left Twitter, I don't have like that central location anymore. So I'm like, what do I put?
Blue Sky's
It's
from
not stupid to be on Twitter. You're doing great. I just bounced out of it because there's so many other options. There's Threads, Blue Sky, and Mastodon. So I just jumped over there, and that's where a lot of my people. Mastodon's cool. It's like you get to join kind of think of an email address. You got a Gmail or Hotmail, whatever. Mastodon's similar in that you join a server that's like kind of in around your special.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. It's 4:00. We're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to the digital media track room number 6 here. You're here for the panel called Digital Media into IRL Skills. So what today's panel is going to be about is we're going to be talking a little bit. We have a diverse group of panelists today that have, taken this hobby of content creation or sometimes career of content creation and taking that into other spaces, whether that be a, type of day job, so to speak, or some other type of hobby and things. And we'll talk a little more about that. Before we jump into the conversation, though, I want to just read a little bit of the track promotion here, including our track sponsor for this year is Zakat. For over 22 years, they've been empowering lives through disaster relief, food distribution, orphan care, and more. Their top-notch ratings from Charity Navigator and BBBY's Giving Alliance means your contributions are going to make a difference. And you can do that at zakat.org, and I believe there is a QR code in front of me. There's also a QR code for the Dragon Con charity for 2024, which is the Arthritis Foundation. It's the #1 cause of disability. Arthritis affects nearly 60 million adults and hundreds of thousands of children. Dragon Con will be matching up to $125,000. That's because y'all did so good last year with $100,000. They're going to bump it up to $125,000. Yeah. Last year, the total was $272,000 for last year's charity. And again, there's a QR code there for the new school way. There's a little bin here for the old school way. If you have any change in your pocket, Dragon Con and the Arthritis Foundation would really appreciate that. So I want to take a moment to introduce myself and our panelists today. My name is Rob Roberts, and I am the co-host of a long-running video game podcast about video games online called Orange Lounge Radio, which I started with my friends I met playing Dance Dance Revolution in the year 2002 is when we started that show, and we just celebrated our 1014th episode the week before I came out here to Dragon Con. So thanks everyone. I appreciate the applause and not an intervention. That means a lot. So I'll talk a little bit about my IRL skills a little later as we go on down, but Ash, why don't you introduce yourself? And I will ask the panelists, this may function a little differently than other panels you've seen, because I really want to take some deep dive conversations over this hour. So I really want our panelists to be able to take time to talk about themselves and these questions I'm going to ask them. So Ash, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, what it is you do in content creation and what maybe some of your IRL hobbies that intersect with it are.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Ash, and I stream on twitch.tv/AshSaidHi. I mostly play retro games, and I love the Commodore Amiga and DOS games and Super Nintendo, all that kind of stuff. I've been broadcasting since March of 2019. I'm a Twitch ambassador. I'm the newly appointed Women's Guild leader, so gonna be helping to uplift women in our space. Very excited about that. And I love speaking on panels and doing this kind of thing. So I feel like how that has transitioned my skills into like public speaking, so if you have to give a presentation at work, or if you have to be the person that sets up the meeting because you know how to run OBS or you know how to use like the video camera and no one else does, those are skills that are quite handy when you do these kinds of things. So, or even just leading a meeting, like a lot of people are very like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk. I don't know how to organize my thoughts. And these skills have helped me to be better at that exponentially. So I'm glad to be able to share them with you today.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I'm Steven Adams. I do a podcast called Those Were the Days. I'm basically a 70-year-old man trapped in a 40-year-old body, where we talk about retro TV, like old classics from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It's a great time to do that with my friends, TV's Travis, Audie Norman, and Amy Frost. We have a great time with that. You can usually find me at twitch.tv/2dorkstv streaming on Monday nights at 9 o'clock. I've also done some comedy shows in the past, Horseshoes and Hand Grenades being one that ran for a really long time. I've been podcasting since 2005, so there's a whole lot of history there and a whole lot of learning how to talk on a microphone, which has been a huge deal for work, which is where I kind of got put on this panel, is because I started leading demo meetings. I work for a big software company, so we build stuff, and then every couple of weeks we have to demo it. And when those meetings were kind of boring, I was like, I could probably try to host these things and make them a little more fun. So that's what I started doing. I started using those comedy skills that I learned doing Horseshoes and Hand Grenades to lighten it up a little bit and add music and highlight contributors every couple weeks when we do a demo day. So we get to shine a light on somebody that contributes, and that usually makes everybody feel good, celebrate work anniversaries, things like that. So being able to have these skills where I can host, I can press buttons, I can make music play, all those kinds of things contributed to a lot that has taken me from just that 50-person meeting all the way up to our 250-person quarterly meetings, where they were like, hey, there's a guy down there that does that stuff. And it's become even more fun and puts me in front of a lot more people, where I try to pretend I'm confident in it. So that's been the big thing. That's what I do.
Hi, I'm Rilo W. Ward. I, in May of 2020, had this brilliant idea and said to my best friend, hey, why don't we make a podcast? We haven't updated it recently because she got pregnant and married and life. But it is Gilda Calamitous Podcast. We are a Venture Brothers Rewatch podcast. I also do some digital writing for Adult Swim Central. And it's translated into my day job because I now, work with electronics, and I have a deeper understanding of the components that go into making the art. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Bobby, how about you?
Awesome. So my name is Bobby Blackwolf. I am a 40-year-old man trapped in a 20-year-old body. And I am a long-running video game podcast. Now, my long was just a little bit shorter than Rob's by about a couple years. I've been a video game podcaster since 2005, so I just celebrated a little over 19 years and had something like, I think 906 was the episode that I did last Sunday night. So I have been doing it live on the podcast live since the beginning. So that was Shoutcast Internet Radio. So I was a streamer before streaming was really a thing. And it's basically, it's an AM radio style talk show about video games and the video game industry, because I'm a software developer by my day job. So I can translate between technical stuff and non-technical people and explain it. And that's something that's helped in my day job. But what it has actually been able to do is that it's been able to open up other opportunities for public speaking. And so some of the things that I have been able to do because of that is moderating panels, especially here at DragonCon. And this year, actually, I've been promoted up to main programming here at DragonCon, which is the big ballroom panels. Right after this, I have to go wrangle Catherine Tate again and try to keep her on topic for an hour. But a lot of that is because when I was in the video game podcasting, we were considered media back in the day, which we're not really. Podcasts aren't that much anymore because now it's YouTubers and Twitch. But I would go to E3, I would interview Peter Molyneux. I would get to meet Shigeru Miyamoto. I didn't get to actually interview Miyamoto, but I met him. And so that kind of cured me of the being starstruck, and I could work with that. But then doing it live, and I always interacted with my chat room, and I'm a solo podcaster. So I have to be able to read the chat and figure out what I want to repeat on a moment's notice. And so that helped me work with another organization that I know Ash has also worked with. And I'm going to explain a little bit. It's an organization called Games Done Quick. Now, Games Done Quick is a speed running charity marathon. So if you are a 40-year-old trapped in a 20-year-old body like I am, I'm going to equate it to the Jerry Lewis telethons of our youth, where it was a telethon, and they were taking donations. And I am lucky enough to have been one of the 25 hosts. So I'm the analogy to the operators are standing by person. And Games Done Quick, it runs twice a year, and they will raise about $2.5 million throughout a week for their charity. It's usually either Doctors Without Borders or Prevent Cancer Foundation, depending on when it is in the year. And doing the live chat like I have, I also read donations on the air. So what my job is as a host is, between the games, I tell everybody, here's what's coming up, here's the incentives, here, please, this is why you want to donate. Do you want to see this go from easy mode to hard mode, make it harder for the runners? But then when there's a lull in the commentary of the game that they're speed running, because they're playing games really quickly, that's the variety act in our Jerry Lewis telethon analogy here. They'll be like, Bobby, do you have any donations? And I have a split second to have already figured out which donations on my screen I want to read, because I'll have like 50 and I need to pick like 2 or 3, and be able to make sure, yes, they're okay to read on air, and then deliver them split second. And me doing the podcast every Sunday night the way I have been, and being able to interact with my community, has really honed those skills. So when I'm on stage at GDQ, I can actually use that. So those are some of the skills that I kind of perfect doing just the podcast by myself with my community, and I can bring them to the big stage. And the Catherine Tate panel is kind of the same way, because Catherine Tate doesn't use a moderator, but we are still reading questions from Discord for accessibility and anxiety reasons here at DragonCon. So I have to come in, and I am going through the Discord chat messages to find a good question to ask Catherine between the actual in-person questions. So it's a lot of that same type of stuff. Rob, what about you? What are you doing?
Thanks for asking. So in my day job, I actually am in corporate learning. I'm a manager for a large company in corporate learning. And so we, actually, it's funny, we use a lot of the same principles in digital media in how do we get people to learn and retain information, because a lot of things are tilting towards, TikTok and quick learning and things like that. And so it's given me a lot of technical skills that have actually come in very handy in my day job. I also have this very kind of interesting intersection of, not only has it helped my day job, but then for hobbies, I also have had the fortune of being able to moderate some larger panels at DragonCon this year. And absolutely, where you were talking about that ability to be able to kind of read chat in advance, that's what we're doing with Discord. Because as you all know, if you've been to any of the big ballroom panels, you know that they're taking questions both ways. And so, being able to read Discord for when you're ready to pop in that question, it's a very important thing to be able to do. A lot of that has also been influenced by many, many, many years ago, my ex-girlfriend. This will tell you how long ago it is now, because I have a husband now. But she took me to, and maybe she regrets it, she took me to my very first Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I fell in love with, it wasn't so much, the movie's actually kind of bad. Even though Tim Curry's amazing, the movie's actually kind of bad. It's the community that is incredible. It keeps it going, and you can just be whoever you want to be. But I put that out there because that ended up being my home. And at some point, I started hosting Rocky Horror Picture Show. And then when they started doing Rocky Horror locally in Sacramento, where I'm based, it turned into, hey, Rob, do you want to host like the horror film festival short collection? And then, hey, we're going to be screening this horror movie and we're going to do the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we're bringing in the actor that played Grandpa, because he's actually the youngest guy in the cast. And we're going to bring him in and do like some Q&A and all that stuff. Is that something you want to do? And so, yeah, I was able to actually do that. So all of these things have interestingly sort of intersected for me and my skills. So thanks for asking. I want to kind of pose the chicken and the egg question to the panel. What I mean by that is, because you've all kind of heard us talk about, there's the podcast and there's our work or hobby. Which came first, and which would you say influences the other more? So for example, for me, I would say, I've been doing digital media and podcasting a very long time. Interestingly enough, I've been hosting Rocky Horror longer, so it's almost a way that they influence each other very much. But I would say that I have noticed first my digital media skills coming into my real life day job skills, if you will, before I notice my day job skills bleeding into the other things that I do. So which came first? Ash, which came first for you?
Oh my gosh, it's so difficult to answer because I'm now streaming and doing these things full time.
Yeah.
So it kind of turned into, this became so much of a project, a passion project for me. Then it became profitable, and then it turned into my job. So I would say, though, that the main thing that influenced my ability to do this at a high level was actually school. Like when I went to school, I took public speaking, and I did a lot of, like, business communication and things like that. And that helped me, that helps me even to this day. So I feel like there's a lot of things, and especially when I worked in the games industry, like that was my first time kind of being on stage and like hosting an event or building an event for the consumer. So a lot of those things inform what I do today. So, but if I was working in the corporate setting, I feel like I would be using a lot of these skills in that space as well.
But you bring up an interesting point that, you're in a position that not all of us on the panel are, where you have been able to have streaming kind of turn into that full time. When was that kind of point that you knew, like, all right, I'm gonna jump in and do this. This is gonna be my full time thing. And like, what kind of made you realize that's what you wanted to do?
When I started making more money than I did when I was working in a corporate office.
That'll do it.
That's when I was like, okay, I can do this. So that kind of hit for me last year and the year before last. And it was because I was able to attain a lot of sponsorships through companies. I do play a lot of retro games, right? And people wonder, like, well, how can you play like these games that were released 40 years ago and then get paid today? Well, a lot of games that are coming out today are remasters or remakes, or they have that kind of vibe of, pixel look or PS1, PS2 look. And so they're looking for people who have that already established audience that love that kind of stuff, but then will also accept new things that kind of remind them of the things of past. So I think that's kind of how, and also just through events like this, like, when I go to TwitchCon, I'm not going for free. They're paying me. So, like, you get a lot of that, and, just putting yourself out there. It's not easy, auditioning for things all the time. I remember the first time when I had auditioned for GDQ, I was scared.
Yeah.
I was like shaking.
It's intimidating.
It is very intense when you don't know what to expect. And then, you do it once and you're like, oh, okay. But I'm not kidding you. Bobby sat next to me the entire time my first day, and helped me out. So, but you go through things like that and you learn, and then you figure out what you're comfortable with and what you need to get better at. And then you just, approach people to like get more jobs. Like that's what I do all the time. Like I'm always putting myself out there and not being scared to email somebody and either get a rejection or get accepted. If I get rejected, who cares? Try again. That's it. So that's how I keep going.
All right, thank you. Stephen, let me pitch the chicken and the egg question at you.
Yeah.
Which did you start noticing was influencing the other first?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to be an entertainer at my core. Like when I was in high school, it was a band, and then I was like, I'm going to be a filmmaker. And then at some point, podcasting came along and said, oh man, I get to talk and put stuff on the internet. That'll scratch that itch. So I started working that way. And initially, I wasn't confident in my job. I was kind of like hiding in the corner kind of person. Let me just do my work. I'll stay quiet. I don't want to get noticed real big. I just want to get noticed enough to get bumps and people to notice I'm good at my job, but not necessarily be out there doing it for any kind of notice. But I started as a software developer kind of late in my career, and I learned, I'm doing Twitch now. I want to build bots. I want to get better at software development. So I'll learn how to build bots to get better at the software side of things, kind of letting that teach me those kinds of skills. So initially, that was really the thing that happened. I made neat little bots for host for a charity stream before they had all these websites you could go to and just wire stuff up. I had to build it myself so that I could know when people donated and things like that. And then I got into a company that was more, a little bit more free. Let's say I've worked for government for a long time. They don't really want to have fun. The governments don't want to do that. They just want to do their meetings and be like, we're boring and we're great and let's get through this and all that. Then I went for a company that had more of a meritocracy based, good ideas come from everywhere kind of thing. So when we started doing those demo meetings and things and they were really dry, I was like, I think I could get noticed and feel comfortable here throwing in some humor and being a little bit more exciting and kind of making these things work a little bit better for people. So then the influence of all the digital media stuff started really working towards that. And mostly that was because I got more comfortable at the place. And now I'm kind of known as the hype man at work more than I'm known as the software developer at work. Like I do the software, do my main job, but the thing that people know me for is, bringing the thunder, I like to say. So we go into a meeting and it could be really boring. The thing that is difficult is when you do those meetings and you're like, hype, and then somebody comes on, they're like, all right, let's go through our quarterly results, and you're like, okay, now that was great quarterly results. Let's go, so I have to learn how to kind of keep the energy going and kind of influence those people to be a little bit more comfortable. And there's some that are great, and there's some people that are not, they don't want to be in front of the camera. But it's really helped me kind of work through that. So it kind of helped. It's a weird kind of symbiotic relationship, but now it's mostly, my digital media is really starting to influence more and more the work stuff. And I'm not as afraid when we do have calls for this, we need an MC for this, or we need to do this, to go out there and say, hey, I'll do it. But there is a lot of fear. You're right about that, but at the same time, I know I'm capable because I've been doing it now for a while. It just takes time to learn that stuff.
Stephen, I just wanted to note the interesting parallel between you and Ash. Even though you both do very different things, they're both retro based. You're in TV
Right,
and
yeah.
she's in games. And I think it's interesting that you're both also kind of known in a way for your hype, right? Like
Right.
GDQ is absolutely trying to get
Yeah.
donations, hype, and all that.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, I just knowing Bobby over the years, I know retro's a passion of his
Yeah.
too. So it's just
Yeah.
just an interest. Maybe knowing your history means something. I don't know.
Yeah.
something
It's
something I
like-
noticed. Just a
Yeah.
little something.
Yeah.
Well, Rilo, I want to go to you with the chicken and the egg question. I think I got the sense you said you started your podcast in 2020, but did you
Yes.
notice that, like, something kind of was affecting the other sort of first?
Yeah, I mean, the podcast came before my job
Oh, okay.
actually started because I was out of work. It was 2020.
Uh,
What were we all doing?
mm,
Like, and I just decided I'm gonna take this cartoon I really love and I'm gonna analyze it with a friend who has never seen it before, and we're just gonna toss that out there. And it has like affected more or less other aspects of my life than work. Like it had being in electronics, you're trying to sell someone on like an upgrade of some sort.
Mhm.
It has helped with that. Totally bad. But it's also like I do community theater, and it's really helped with that and being brave enough to step out there and like be like, okay, I'm gonna sing this solo in Rent and I will be fine. Like that sort of mentality. And it also like it going to cons and stuff, it has offered me so many opportunities first and foremost that it has bled into my life that way. Just because I've certainly like I've gotten to interview people who were on the cartoon, and that has been great. And it's these core skills that I'm building, and I'm hoping to reach your guys' level. I am totally not there yet, but yeah.
Don't sell yourself short, because when you said community theater, I thought, oh, this is the plot twist I just uncovered at the end of the chapter, because you didn't bring that up at the beginning. But it takes a lot of guts to do that type of thing.
Yeah,
Everything I do, my friend, is unscripted. That is a whole other talent to do the scripted sort of thing and challenge. So have you, kind of going down that path a little bit, because a podcast is unscripted, but community theater is very scripted. Have you still noticed that there's been a benefit doing one to the other, and what is that?
Oh, yeah. And well, it definitely is a confidence booster. Like if you get any sort of interaction, and it's the same with community theater, getting any sort of interaction or emotion from an audience, it changes your performance based on what they're going to say. So I've noticed those two sort of bleed together, because I'm certainly much more comfortable like reading off one-liners that, like, coming up with split-second one-liners that will maybe get a chuckle or two. But the fact that I've recognized that and I know where things can fall has helped me to read into literature and plays and musicals a little better, to find my character a little easier.
All right. Thank you so much. Bobby, I want to make sure you get this question
Yeah.
too about which came first.
Well, before I get to that, I want to read a quick donation. We have a $20 donation from Anonymous that said, greetings from Germany, honk orb. All right. Well, thank you so much for the donation. So
Is that a legit chat comment? Because I'd believe it.
I wish. Yes, it was. So what came first for me? Essentially, the podcast came first, and I'll explain why. If you ask anybody I went to high school with, they are absolutely surprised at what I'm doing, because I maybe said like 100 words all through high school, just the entire time. I was the quiet kid that tried not to say anything. I didn't want any attention. I didn't want people to perceive me or anything like that. And then I decided I had some stuff to say when I learned about podcasting, and I had spurned some opportunities. So when I was in college, I was offered, hey, you should come do the radio station. You should be a DJ on the radio station. And I was like, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to try. And I would have been really good at it. But I thought it's a waste of their time, because they're just going to tell me no, and I don't want to waste their time. But then when podcasting and radio came out, and I'm like, I can speak and not be interrupted. This is great. And I had opinions, and I was already part of an existing community. So I already had, a couple listeners. So I started like on first base. I didn't start from scratch. But that got me more comfortable speaking. And then I did start coming to Dragon Con, and I was actually at the first iteration of the podcasting track, which is what this track used to be. In 2006, I was actually a speaker on a panel there, and it was my first panel experience. And then just doing that every Sunday. That is my Sunday night at 8:00, is basically just speaking and interacting with people and knowing that I don't get a second take and it's all out there. So the podcast really came first, and it opened the door for opportunities for me to do panel moderation. And then I was able to say, okay, yes, I will audition for GDQ, because it's an audition process. You re-audition every time. And I was lucky that I scored just high enough to get in my first time. They didn't tell me no. And then I actually, one of my goals in January of 2020 was I was going to take acting classes, because I wanted to do community theater, because that was a challenge I hadn't done yet. And unfortunately, acting classes got canceled.
So did my production of Legally Blonde.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. So, but that's a challenge that I wanted to take, because I got enough confidence doing the podcast and doing the streaming that I'm like, you know what? That's a challenge I think I can take on. And so I was going to get some like legitimate acting classes to say, I want to do community theater once. It's a bucket list item.
What a lot of neat journeys we've heard about on the panel today. And I'm sure some of you all out there in the audience have your own journeys as well. Would love to hear some of your stories. Or if you have questions for us here on the panel, we have a microphone there in the middle of the room. Feel free to line up behind that microphone, and we'll take your questions as you have them come in. But if not, I just wanted to open that invitation. We'll get back to you in a minute. But I want to circle back to the panelists with a question here, because usually a crowd question we might get, very typical sort of thing when we're talking about a lot of these sort of opportunities that we're doing, at our job or so forth, might be like, how did you get your start in doing that? How did you get your start with doing this, interesting industry or hobby that you have? And how did you get your foot in the door? And I know one common thread I've heard from multiple people is this concept of auditions and having to kind of step up and take that, and not being afraid to hear no, right, is a huge one. So I'm just noting that I've already kind of heard that one. But Ash, if someone kind of wants to really take, let's say they want to take their streaming to the next level, like, where you're at, what are some of the skills they can do and really get their foot in the door doing it?
I think an important skill to have, I would definitely advocate for taking any kind of class on public speaking. Like, if you can, please, or take any kind of class in acting. Improv is really great, because it allows you to react in the moment and teach yourself how to act in the moment. For me, it was all trial and error. Like I started streaming. When I started streaming, I had like the most basic setup. I only had an iMac at the time because I have a degree in graphic design. So that was like my main job. And I literally was like, I'm just going to start. I'm not going to buy like any fancy equipment. So I had the built-in camera, the built-in microphone, and my capture card and my Switch. And that was it. And through, doing it over and over and streaming consistently, like 3 times a week, 3 hours a day, I just started to get better, and more people started to watch, and then I started upgrading my equipment slowly. I think a lot of people also feel like you have to have everything when you first start out, or you need some kind of like beefy setup. No, you don't. All you need is you yourself, and your confidence and your talent and your ability to adapt with change and the desire to want to push yourself to get better. And eventually, because I started like right before COVID, and then like when that started to happen, there was like a big boom on Twitch, and like there was a lot of viewership and stuff like that. And that's been kind of like where you have to have some learning, is how to continue to maintain even after that viewership might have dropped, because just simply not as many people are watching. Like you just learn to adapt and how to try and draw people in with your personality. So it's going to take a lot of like recording yourself, watching the recording, making sure that you're paying attention, and like you care about what's going on in chat, and making people feel welcome, and kind of building a brand around your channel, because that's a big thing too that keeps people attracted, is like, do you have a concept behind what you're doing? Are you telling a story? Are you interesting? Are you sharing information? Or are you funny? Like all of those things will help heighten your ability to get better at what you're doing if you want to commit to this, and understanding that a lot of the work you do is going to be free for a long time.
I'm so glad you laid it out like that, though, because that is such an important. I just want to like bold and underline something you said there about, it doesn't matter like the level of your equipment. It's that making that commitment and making that hobby is so much more important in the beginning. The rest of it will come with time, right?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so glad you echoed that, because I've been saying that a long time too. So let's go ahead and take this question here, and then I'll return to the others with that question about how to get your foot in the door. Yes.
Hi, thank you for coming out. So my question is, we're talking about real world versus your digital media careers. Have you ever gotten a piece of advice in one world, like in digital media or real life, that you said, maybe I should actually use it in the other instead, and it benefited you overall? Have you ever had that experience before?
Yeah, I have recently. And it's related to doing GDQ. And because when we do our auditions, we get feedback. And one of the big pieces of feedback that I get on my auditions is like, you say a lot. Mm-hmm. And so that was like, okay, I do. I just did, right? And I do it when I'm trying to think of the next thing to say. And I used my Sunday night podcast to start doing pauses instead of the way that I used to do it, and trying to perfect it then, so the next time I auditioned, maybe I wouldn't get that kind of feedback. Because on my podcast, when it's just me and I'm talking, I'm like, so we've got this, and I want to talk about this, and let me do that, and I learned, okay, I do need to just slow down, take some pauses, and that is when I can practice it. So I can refine my skills. Even though it might not be completely needed on the podcast, it's a good skill to have.
Thank you.
Okay.
I could speak that maybe in my world, there's been a lot of conversation. I imagine a lot of professional workplaces and stuff. There's a lot of conversation around AI right now. And how that's going to be a game changer for better or for worse, or wherever it is. And I think we're still trying to like carve out that space. And I think it's the whole conversation around AI is, ready or not, it's coming, and so there's been a lot of talk in my day job about that. But I feel like thanks to that, I feel like, especially in the gaming space, and I don't know if my fellow gamers on the panel have experienced this, but there's a lot of, man, FAI and all that stuff that people, say, which and rightfully so when it comes to some of it and what some of the larger corporations are doing. And, why the SAG-AFTRA is striking after all, because, AI can't replace art. Right. And I think that's something that we have come to agree on. But it's helped me, I think, come from more of an informed place about, well, it's easy to say FAI, but the reality is you're being, ignorant to the fact that whether you like it or not, it's coming as a tool. And we still have to figure out like what that balance is. And I feel like we're able to have more of a measured discussion of that on our gaming show, kind of realizing both sides of that, because I can still sit here and say, I'm trying to be mindful of the young ones in the room, but the AI, that many of us would do. And because of the greed and all that we see, the replacement of actual artists that we see in that sort of space. But then it's kind of also one of those, but the tool, right? So I feel like sometimes putting on the big boy pants for my day job on my more, free for all gamer space sometimes actually comes in handy. Not everybody likes it, but I'm not here to please everybody. So
Yeah.
I can definitely see how that's useful.
Yeah.
I will say, just to go back to your question a little bit, I was thinking about it. The watching my, not feedback directly from listeners or everybody at work. I was like, great job or whatever. But I will watch those demos and I will watch my podcast, look at them through two different sets of eyes. Okay, well, I did this in the demo and it didn't go over well because I do it on the podcast. So I'll change how I operate, and you kind of end up figuring out how to take the skills that you do podcasting and be like, okay, well, this works there, but doesn't necessarily work here. So I'll rework it a little bit and change how I operate on this side, because you are going from a corporate atmosphere to a gamer friend atmosphere, and how do you balance all the things you've learned, but use only the things appropriate for that venue. So watching both things with different sets of eyes to kind of figure out how to do it so it's appropriate for that audience. Play to the audience, I think, is what I've learned doing that. So that's kind of, my feedback. Yeah.
All right. Certainly, if you have any other questions, come on up to the mic. But otherwise, I'm going to go back to the question we had earlier about the start in the industry and hobby. Rilo, I actually want to hear from you a little bit on this, because you mentioned earlier, before the podcast, I think you said you were doing some digital writing for Adult Swim Central, and that sounds kind of neat and interesting.
That actually came after the podcast.
Oh, okay. Then I'm really curious then, how did you kind of get through on that?
So it just sort of happened. I wrote an essay for the anniversary of the pilot, and then it turned into, well, do you want to write more? He was looking, the main editor of it, John J. Galbo, who he's been a previous guest here, asked me, do you want to write regularly for this? And then it sort of turned into this thing. And then I was like, can I write about conventions? Because conventions are my safe space. They just in general are. And then it turned into, I can go and actually sort of use this as a tool then to get more people to realize that, hey, this is not just an anime thing. And that's the big thing, is I've had people read an article I've written about a convention, or I'm working on one now. I attended, I was a nanny for 8 years before everything else. And the youngest of my nanny kids, they just went to their very first convention. And so getting to see them experience being in this world for the first time, and it's, you sort of, I'm hoping I can in the piece get across the wonder that kind of goes with that. But yeah, the podcast itself, though, I still don't know how. I mean, I started out, I literally was recording with a pair of Apple earbuds on my iPhone 6S.
Yeah.
That's how that's how it started. And then it was like, okay, I'm gonna get better headphones. So I got like a Turtle Beach thing, and then I was like, well, I kind of want to do some more editing, make it a little fancier. So then I ended up putting most of my stimulus towards a pretty decent gaming laptop to get all of that done. And then it was like, okay, I'm just gonna buy an actual microphone. And there was definitely a progression.
I kind of want to do, before we get to the audience question, just kind of also bold something you said there. I think is so important is you kind of mentioned that you did the one essay that got noticed that led to something else. And I think that's such an important point about giving your all, no matter what the crowd size is. For all I know right now, the CEO of Twitch is sitting. Well, no, not him, because we know what he looks like. But for example,
But we're on Twitch right now, so
watching.
Game
That's
Clancy,
right.
hi.
You're darn right. He could
Help me
be
get
watching.
started.
You don't know, but I think you all understand my point. You don't know who might be in the room that might be there to open up the next door. And I think that's why it's so, because I've seen so many streamers. I don't know about y'all. I've seen so many streamers like, well, there's only 2 people watching. Who cares about that? But it's like, well, who knows who one of those 2 people is?
Right.
Yeah.
That might be the next person that's like your next big collaborator, your next big partner.
I
You don't
will
know.
say for me, that has exactly happened. Like I was, when I became a Twitch ambassador, I was on the front page of Twitch for a little while to celebrate that. And then somebody from NBC contacted me, and then I got cast to be on a TV show that was aired on NBC Peacock because they Instagram DM'd me and was like, "Oh, I'm a part of this casting company. Here's the link." And I had known the casting company because I had cast before for $100,000 Pyramid and didn't get it, so I knew that it was legit. And then she was like, "Yeah, just go for it." And I kind of had an idea that they were gonna cast me no matter what, so I just did it. Anyway.
Nice.
Wow.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I had the local news once. Not quite as cool, but hey, that's.
But you never know who's watching.
Right, it's still
And-
cool in the
and
moment.
I also had a similar situation because I didn't think like a lot of the first episodes we were getting like 1 or 2 listeners maybe. But then it got to a point where it's like, oh, there's only like 100 people listening to this. It's fine. It's fine. And then it turned out like one of the creators was like retweeted something that we posted, and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Like just knowing that like they knew we existed was unreal.
Senpai noticed me.
Senpai, pretty much.
I
Pretty
love that.
much, yeah.
You've been so patient. I want to make sure we get your
it's
question.
okay. Y'all are fascinating. Ash, we were all very excited to hear that you've been able to give up the corporate job.
Yeah.
And you used a phrase before, multiple streams of income.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering how you are making your money. What percentage is day job versus monetizing your podcast versus public speaking or anything else. I think it's fascinating how people make their money,
Yeah, of course.
especially if we're all in the arts.
Yeah. Right now, 0% of it is a day job. So, I mean,
That is the dream.
yeah,
Wow.
this is all like, things that I do. But I would say like probably like 40% of it is from sponsorships. And then the rest is from streaming or, like something related to somebody from Twitch asking me, "Hey, Ash, can you do this video for us? Or can you do this like, tweet for us or whatever?" Like, but yeah, 0 is day job. But before it was, but yeah.
No, actually, and I'm willing to say it's a completely different scenario for me. I kind of, it's because I've been in this space so long, since 2002. I kind of made peace with the fact that, I'm probably not going to make money with this as a sole source of income. And my day job is really what I lean into. And, that's why I prioritize that first. And I always go, maybe I'm not going to be able to do certain things I want to do in the streaming space because I have to, do the day job and commit to that because that's what feeds my cats. But at the end of the day, for me, I do, here at Dragon Con doing the moderation and all that stuff. We don't, we're volunteers, just like our hardworking digital media track volunteers over here. We're all volunteers. giving up our time and donating our time. So the money isn't a part of this conversation at all. But I will say I am compensated for hosting shows and doing that thing that I do back home. It's not a lot. It's certainly not enough to live off of, but because of hashtag choices I made in my 20s, I didn't save a lot in that era. So what I do, I actually put all that into investment accounts, the little bits that I make, and I do that, and I let the day job do that, and I invest the other money to try to make up for some lost ground.
We basically make enough money through Patreon to pay for service like web server and stuff. Like that's about it. So we break even. But it's never been a goal of mine to make a ton of money. I think in my 20s it was. Like I was like, I'm gonna do great. I'm gonna be a big old streamer. But then I got a big boy job, and I found myself relying on that income in that job. And now, I got a wife and a kid, and she stays at home, so it's my job to bring home that money and the insurance. More importantly, it comes with it. So in order to, if I was going to replace that job with a digital media job, it'd have to be pretty, a significant kind of haul. And that's not something that I'm going for at this point. Much like Rob, I've kind of settled into, this is a real fun hobby that pays me a little, and I get to go do really fun stuff. And it's all more about friends and community to me. It provides that side of things to my life. That I have good friends at my job, but like this is a whole different side of me that gets to come to places like this and enjoy these kinds of panels. So it's never been the goal, and I don't think it's going to be. If it happened, awesome. But I'm delighted with the job I have, so it's not something that I'm really focused on.
I can tell you exactly how much money I made from my podcast, and it is $52.
All right.
And we spent all of that on our first Dragon Con.
Yeah.
So I had a similar experience. I was like, oh, I could totally do this. This is fine. I can make this my job. And then I turned 30 and reality hit. And I, just this last year, sort of found a career and a niche and something I'm really good at. And it's, fixing computers and game consoles and phones. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, I could buckle down. I could do this and then have digital media stuff on the side. Now that hasn't exactly worked out recently, but the fact that I can still come and do stuff like this, that is reward enough, like that I can go to Dragon Con and I can hang out with my friends, or I recently was in Minnesota at 2D Con, and because I'm insane and did back-to-back cons, it's just that sort of getting to do things has been the payment I've gotten out of my stuff.
Yeah, and that's something that I kind of figured out pretty early, is what is value to you?
Yeah.
And it does, for a lot of people, it is financial. It's financial value, but for other people, it's experiences. And that's kind of where I fall in. I'm going to say something that people will be like, how is that true? You've never heard these words in this order, in this sentence. I like my day job. And most people don't. Okay, so two of us here like.
I like mine
too.
I love my job.
Okay,
Bobby.
so I was proven wrong. All right.
But notice it's all the people who are at peace with,
Yeah.
Yes.
But I genuinely like what I do. I'm a software developer. I do interesting things. I work with good people. I've been very fortunate in that. So I don't want to stop doing that. I never wanted podcasting and streaming to be my day job, because then I'd hate it. And, I'm afraid that at some point I am going to hate my day job, but today is not that day. So I use the podcast as a way to get value, to get experiences to come here. This is a volunteer thing that we do with the panel moderation at Dragon Con. The Games Done Quick stuff, the host is a volunteer position. We only get paid for the badge. The on-camera talent, they are the ones that do get a little bit of a stipend, the ones that are on camera, but I'm not actually on camera. And this ties in to your question before we get to the one that you were asking before we get to you, is that a lot of that, we said auditions is how you get your start, but also it is who you know. And luck gets you in the door, your talent gets you the rest of the way. Yeah. And for to get an on-camera position, or for me to get the main programming thing here, it's a don't call us, we'll call you. But if you know somebody, and you know the right people, and you say, you know what, I'd be really receptive to get that call, you might be able to get that call. But
Yeah.
your ego gets you there. It's your ego that gets you to that position to get that call. Then once you get that call, you need to leave your ego at the door.
Yes.
And that's one of the great things about like the GDQ hosting thing is like, you know, we've got people that don't stream. We have people who are Twitch ambassadors. We have people who are professional esports commentators and stuff. But once they come behind that curtain, we're all equal and we're all, you know, helping each other, and we are all on the same stage and on the same team. But your ego is what gets you to that point, and who you know. You need to walk through the door if somebody shows it to you. I have actually tried to help other people get to just being on panels here on the digital media track. And there are two people, I'm not going to name them. One person walked through that door, owned it, and is on multiple panels this entire weekend. I showed someone else the exact same door at the exact same time. They walked in, looked around, and basically metaphorically was like, cool, walked out. And then he's like, why am I not included on any of this stuff anymore? I'm like, well, you didn't take the opportunity. I showed you the door, you walked in and you were like, oh, that's kind of neat and cool. I'm going to go drink.
Yeah.
And, you know, so if you get shown the door, walk through it, and you never know what'll happen.
I do want to say though, before we get to the question, along those same lines, I mean, as much as I think, and I think this is, I'm going to assume this is true for all of us, as much as we do enjoy our day jobs, you know, if Netflix slipped in my DMs tomorrow and said, hey, we want you to host a nerd talk show, and we're going to pay you similar to what you got for your day job.
Yeah, I'd be doing it.
Yeah.
See ya.
100%.
So
So- Netflix CEO, if you're watching.
All right.
Hey guys, okay. First off, I can already see how great you guys are with communication to be able to take an audience and keep them attracted and engage and entertain. You know, that's a skill set that most people really don't have, even for the things that they're really knowledgeable about and passionate about. So my question more is, how do you expand that? Like you said, you have day jobs, right? How do you also do that with topics that maybe you're not that passionate about or even knowledgeable about, and expand upon it and keep an audience, you know, engage, you know, entertain, and actually get your points across? Because I think you mentioned, Rob, you're in corporate learning.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure there's a vast amount of topics maybe you have to, you know, teach or expand upon. How do you do that for things that, you know, outside of your hobbies and your interests, you know, things that most people might not find that interesting?
I would say lead with curiosity. Like, think about, if I didn't know anything about a topic, I'd be like, well, what do I want to learn? You know, learning new things is interesting to me. So if I'm curious about it, I think about it from that perspective, and then start to ask myself questions, and then imagine, if I'm asking those questions, how would I answer them, or how would I hope that people would answer them, and then kind of use that to guide the conversation. So if I'm like, okay, I have to do something about math, you know, like I'm like, all right, I wasn't the best at math, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who's excited about it. So then figure out, like, be curious, like, okay, well, how do I learn this equation? And then where can that lead me to? And then how can I take that information and use it in the real, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then you get excited about it, and people live through that enthusiasm. That's how I would start.
I'm going to draw a really interesting parallel here between what Ash just said and my old world. I can talk a little bit more openly about what I used to do. And I used to facilitate for a health insurance company their call center classes. They hired new reps. I would basically have to give them a 6-week crash course on here's how health insurance works in America, because you're going to be taking calls, answering these questions, right? Which, as I'm sure you all know, is a fascinating topic. So, and my guiding principle, you know, and I, without, you know, sounding too ego, I was pretty good at what I did. And I would often get comments about, you know, wow, your style is just so different. What is it that makes you different? And I always say, I teach people the way I want to be trained and the way I want to be learned. And oftentimes when I'm up in front of a class teaching something I don't even know about, which, you know, the very first time I ever had to do a class on Medicare, I was like, I don't know anything about this, fine, you know, but if the materials are written a certain way and so forth, it's like, you know, you just kind of try to have that enthusiasm, that smile, that confidence. And then it's like, okay, it's like I'm teaching it to myself in front of an audience. And I think this is an interesting common denominator with game streaming too, because you're learning a game through an audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
So there's a common thread for you.
You're bringing your own personality to it, I think, is a big thing. Like you're not, don't mute yourself is the big thing I try not to do when I'm teaching. It's like, okay, anybody can read PowerPoint lines. So I do little tricks, if I'm trying to. So I'll get curious, like you said, learn as much as you can. Then you kind of figure out that you are a little passionate because you know stuff. Once you know stuff, you can feel more passionate because you feel like I have the answers. You get a little bit of a boost. And then you do little tricks like to make something more entertaining. Instead of putting every word of the PowerPoint or whatever it is slide on the screen, you just pop in one bullet at a time. And that keeps people engaged because they can't read the whole thing. And you're not just reading one bullet at a time going down. And you can throw in some colorful language and stuff so that you kind of inject your personality into how you teach. Which is probably a lot about like Rob when they were saying, I like your style. Your style matters. It's not just the slides. It's not just the material. It's you. And that's what people come to see. And that's how you inject what you're doing into it. So it's not as boring because you're unique as a person. And the way you do it, you're the only one that can say it the way you say it. So I think that you just have to be confident in your own abilities and your own personality and walk out there and give it what you've got.
Yeah, when I do work, President, because I also get to use a lot of this stuff at work because I was also working for a remote company way before a lot of people did. And I use the same setup I use to stream at work. So I've got the nifty lights. I've got the microphone. I've got the mixer. I actually use the Go XLR mixer and its soundboard more on work meetings than I do streaming. They love it when I'm like, no, that's wrong. And it does have a bleep button. So if I really want to beep, I just hit the button when I'm talking. But when I'm doing presentations, because that's the part of public speaking, and if I know the room, which is like my coworkers or something, I inject humor into it, even though it's a dry topic. So I will put animated GIFs around that say, have, different things about what's on there. And I will even use quick slides being like, so what do you think? Should we be doing this? And if the answer is no, I will then go to the next slide. And it's the sloth turning his head going, how about no? And then if it's a really dry topic, this is one of my favorite tricks is like, okay, if we get through this, I will show you the greatest cat video on the internet. and I tease them with that. And then I do actually play it, which by the way, it's an older video, but it's the of AWOL Nation's Sail. And it's this little Siamese cat going across a ledge. And then it jumps off right at the sail. It's hilarious. And it gets funnier the more you watch it. So we watch it 2 or 3 times as a reward for sitting through the dry part. So I bring in humor and personality into it, and that keeps people engaged.
Yeah. There is so much SpongeBob in every slide deck I do.
2 hours later.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Rilo, I feel like you wanted to jump in on this question.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, first of all, it's GIF.
No, the creator.
Listen, no, don't start that. We got 5 minutes left. Wrong.
Okay.
The creator says it's GIF.
We'll talk about this later. But yeah, humor has been, a great thing. Being able to, because I also have to deliver bad news to some people about their various devices. Like, say, I had mentioned this at the other digital media panel that I was on. I had to tell a woman that her MacBook was dead. And the way they're built now, the hard drives are built into the motherboards.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
She lost the first draft of her novel.
Yeah.
And yeah. Cloud storage, everyone.
Yeah. This is your notification to back up your stuff.
Yeah. But I was able to sort of flip her day around by, injecting tiny bits of humor, but also engaging,
Yeah.
and
human.
and asking, oh, what was the book about? Asking to hear about the characters and stuff.
The human connection.
Yeah.
So
And
important.
that's something that I have definitely developed more through digital media that I haven't otherwise.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are about out of time, but I want to go back and allow our panelists to give one more plug for any of their products and things. And if you would like to talk to us, we can't really congregate in the room because there's going to be another panel coming in, although I would encourage you to stay and see all the great programming. But we'll be outside the room for a little bit if you want to ask any follow-up questions or just say hello or what have you. So that being said, thank you all so much for being here. It's such a fun discussion. I just getting to know other people. It's so good.
Yeah.
But Ash, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself one more time?
Sure. My name is Ash Said Hi. You can find me on all social media at Ash Said Hi, but mostly you will find me at twitch.tv/Ash Said Hi, where I stream 5 days a week, all kinds of retro games and fun experiences.
Steven?
Yeah, and I'm Steven Adams. Again, I do Those Were the Days. It's about old TV every Monday night at 9 on Twitch, except this Monday because I'll be tired. At twitch.tv/2dorkstv. You can find all that information at legionofdorks.com. It's been a blast. Thank you for having me.
I'm Rilo W. Ward. You can find me at, I made this handle when I was 18. Your Cabbage. I thought I was being funny. On all social media platforms. And you can check out Guild Podcast on all platforms as well. That's where you'll find my stuff. And AdultSwimCentral.com is where you can sort of peruse my articles.
Bobby?
All right. And I host the Bobby Blackwell Show. I thought I was only going to do it for 19 weeks. I've been doing it for 19 years. It's live each and every Sunday night, except tonight because we're here. Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern for about an hour right before Orange Lounge Radio, which Rob will talk about in a second. It's a podcast about the video game industry. It is on all the podcast platforms, but we broadcast on the Voice of Geeks Network Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/VOG Network, VOG Network. And I just say it the way the creator says it. And if somebody tells me how to pronounce their name, I try to respect it.
I have to follow that as I usually do because over at twitch.tv/VOG Network, Orange Lounge Radio is on at 9 o'clock Dragon Time and 6 o'clock Pacific every Sunday night, except tonight for obvious reasons. And of course, if you want to follow me, best way to do that is on a Linktree, probably links to everything. So that's linktree.ee, that thing, /Rob Roberts. I'm Mr. Rob Roberts on most social media, like Instagram. I just don't use Twitter anymore. So. But thank you again so much, everybody, for coming out. Really appreciate you. Bye.
Thank you.
And go enjoy watching the grass with your gin and tonic.
That was great. Thank you,
Thank you so much for
being here.
Thank you.
Are you here in Atlanta?